Now just look at the understanding when there were no computers. Okay, so we have the game between Peter Leko having the rating of 2666 versus Alekseenko Kirill having the rating of 2679. And all those who are new to chess who don't know who Peter Leko is, just to let you guys know, Peter Leko today he's not in his prime, but when he was in his own era, he was a monster. And at his own time, there were no engines, so we are going to see some real chess. So let's begin. Peter Leko playing with the white pieces. It's round 3.1 of the FIDE World Cup 2025. We have e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to b5. We have the royal piece opening on the board. a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castle up, and now bishop e7. If black goes for capturing the pawn on e4, it looks like a free pawn, but white can push the pawn in the center with d4 opening up the center. Why? Because black's king is already in the center, rook e1 is coming up, and white is already good. So black plays bishop e7, white plays rook e1, b5, bishop b3, castle, a4, b4, and now we have d4 striking in the center. So a4 is a very typical move in such positions, just pushing the pawn, not allowing, just trying to grab some space on the queen side. Black plays b4, we have d4, and now we have d6. If black goes for capturing the pawn on d4, it won't be a good idea because now white can push the pawn to e5, kicking the knight back, and now bishop d5 at the place of capturing the pawn. And after bishop d5, white is going to capture the pawn on d4. You can't take because the rook is hanging on a8 and white is already better. So we have d6, and now de, knight takes, we have a trade of knights, and now queen e2. And now we have a5, a very normal move trying to protect the pawn on b4 with the idea of bishop a6 attacking the queen. We have rook d1 attacking the queen, bishop a6 counter attacking the queen. White moves the queen to b3. We have queen e8, and now we have bishop g5, bishop b7 attacking the pawn on e4. And now the real chess is about to begin. Bishop b7, black is attacking the pawn on e4 twice with the knight and with the bishop. Now, if you're a good player, or if you're an absolute beginner, now if you're a good player, that's even better to help you guys even understand it better. Currently, white is having the bishop pair, and all those who don't know, bishop pair is something which is very special, and it is always said that you must have bishop pair. Peter is like, I don't care, I'll just give up my bishop pair and allow black to take back the bishop, and now black is the one having the bishop pair. So it looks like a bad idea, right? Why did white simply give up the bishop pair? White could have played something like rook e1 or just let's say knight d2 just to protect the pawn on e4. But Peter is like, he simply took the knight. And now what's happening? Now just look at the understanding when there were no computers. Peter is like, okay, black is having the dark square bishop, which is extremely bad piece. I'm having the knight on b1, which is much better compared to the bishop on f6. Now it looks like the bishop can come in this diagonal, the bishop can go in this particular diagonal, which looks pretty good for black. But even if you put the bishop on c5, you see the bishop is looking at a plain diagonal, nothing is happening, nothing is getting targeted, and basically that's why the bishop on f6 is completely useless piece. Whereas the knight is having some good future. The knight can simply sit on c4, attacking the pawn on a5 and the e5 pawn. So that's how Peter Leko is assessing this position. We have knight d2, rook a6, and now he's like, okay, the bishop on b7 is good, let me just trade off the bishop. We have trade off the bishop, and now you see now it's so easy to play with the white pieces. Knight can jump to e4, the knight can jump to c4, and you see what did Peter Leko is playing. Like he's simply playing some simple chess. He's not complicating the matters even a bit. Like nowadays, people are just focusing on calculation. Peter Leko is like, we don't need calculation. It's all about strategy. Peter Leko is like, I know how to do good trades. My opponent is having a bad bishop, I'm having a good knight, and that's it. That's good enough to win. So Kirill Alekseenko is like, okay, let me push the pawn to e4, sacrificing a pawn in order to just opening up the f6 bishop. And now, of course, you can't really take the pawn directly because then you're losing the b2 pawn. So first, Peter Leko played the move queen e2, attacking the rook on a6. The rook have to move, and now we have first rook a2 just to defend the pawn on b2. And now the e4 pawn is attacked twice. You can't fully protect it. So he lost the pawn, and white is simply better now. White is simply a pawn up. We have f5 by Alekseenko trying to initiate some sort of an attack, attacking the queen because black is a pawn down. Queen goes back, and now just look at how Peter Leko is going to continue. Queen e7. Peter Leko is like, okay, I'm a pawn up. I just need to coordinate my pieces better. The rook on a2 is not nicely placed. I can improve my position of the knight from d2. Maybe I can improve the position of the rook from d1. Maybe I can just remove some, push either of the pawn to stop backering mates. So he starts with queen b3, threatening d6, discover check, capturing the queen. Bishop d6, rook a1, improves the position of the rook. Rook goes to e8. We have h3 first, removing some backrank issues. Queen e5 threatening queen h2. Just knight f3, attacking the queen and also covering the h2 square and also just improving the position of the knight. Queen to f4, and now g3, first attacking the queen. Queen goes back, king g2. He even improved the position of the king. Rook goes to e4, rook e1, improving the position of the rook. Now we have rook e8, and now he could have simply improved his position further with rook a d1, just getting all the pieces into the game with the idea of queen d3, just trying to get the pieces into the game. But instead both the players were in serious time trouble. As you can see the clock, Peter Leko is having 11 minutes, Alekseenko Kirill is having 7 minutes on his clock, and Peter Leko decides to capture the rook on e4, which was not a best decision in this position, because after rook e4, it allows black to get some counterplay with f cross e4, knight d4, and now this is the move which Peter Leko missed, which was queen d2, which is a very strong move in this position, threatening e3. A very strong move in this position. You can't take with the queen because the rook is defending the pawn. And that's why e3 is a very strong move. And Peter Leko spent around 6 minutes of his time playing queen e3. We have a trade of the queen, and now rook e5, attacking the pawn on d5. And now you can say black is going to get the material back. And now Peter Leko played the move rook f1. And now, surprisingly, Kirill Alekseenko did not capture the pawn, and he instead played the move g6. Covering the f5 square. I don't know why did he not take the pawn on d5. Now there are some of the variations that I have inputted in the computer just to make the things easier for you guys to explain me. So basically what I believe here is why Alekseenko did not took the pawn was maybe he was afraid of rook f5 going into this knight versus bishop end game. Maybe because of the pawns are on the dark square, so maybe white can play the move knight d4, knight c6, or maybe knight b3 just to attack the pawn on a5, because then white would be having the passed pawn. I don't know, maybe these could be one of the factors that why Alekseenko Kirill did not took the pawn. For example, just giving you a sample line, maybe let's say bishop attacks the pawn, I can give a check, I can go here, takes, and you see this pawn can't really become a queen, but this pawn can definitely become a queen. So you see, maybe these are one of the reasons why Kirill Alekseenko was also in time trouble, that he did not took the pawn. And another variation that I calculated was, let's say if knight b3, which was the best move according to the engine, after bishop e5, let's say g4, allowing black to capture the pawn on b2. White is now simply better after rook f4, because white is going to get the pawn back, because if you try to even play a move like rook e5 in this position, now white can play rook f5, and this is actually better for white. This is actually winning. Like he takes, and this is winning. This pawn is collapsing, white can get the king. This pawn is also hanging, and this is completely winning. So these are a couple of variations which I believe were the reasons why Kirill Alekseenko did not took. He was not really sure that he should take. So that's why he first played g6 in order to take the pawn on the next move. But this allowed Peter Leko to get the counterplay with rook f4. And now you can't take because your own pawn on e4 is hanging. You can't push the pawn to g5 attacking the rook, because now I'm having rook f5, and now the rook is defended by the knight, and that's it. White is still a pawn up. So we have rook f4, king g7, g4, h5. We have trade off a pawn. Peter Leko simply captured the pawn on e4, giving up the pawn to d5. But now white is simply a pawn up. King f3. Now just look at the endgame skills of Peter Leko. He gets the king. Like whenever you are in the endgame, try to activate your king as well, because it's a piece as well. King f6. Now he moved the rook. Why? Because he wanted to push the pawn to e4, e5. Maybe he wants to get the king in the center. So he first goes back with the knight, attacking the bishop. The bishop goes back, king e2. First he plays king e2 in order to push the pawn to e4. Like the idea of king e2 was just not allowing black to play the move rook d1 maybe. Now he pushes the pawn to e4, taking away the d5 and the f5 square from the rook. The rook goes back. Now you see, now he's like, okay, I can just get my king, but even better is I can improve my position of the knight. He's like, I'm going to put my knight on c4, which is even a better square for the knight, and that's exactly what he did. Bishop goes back, king comes to d3, king goes back, he advances his king further, rook goes to f6, e5, pushing the pawn using, like, perfectly using the pawn, using the passed pawn, using the pawn advantage, e5, attacking the rook. Rook moves, white captures the pawn, captures another pawn. Now Peter is 2 pawns up. Bishop goes back because the bishop was hanging. Bishop goes back, advances the king further, moving the rook with the idea of giving check, kicking the king to the last rank. We have a check. King goes to c6, pushing the pawn to b3, just trying to fix the pawn on the dark squares on b2 maybe. But now we have h4, trying to push another pawn. We have rook c1 attacking the knight. The king goes to b5, king move, pushing another pawn to h5. Rook h1, giving a check, pushing the pawn to h6. So you see, he's using all his resources pretty nicely, using all his pawns. He knows he's 2 pawns up, so let's push both the pawns. h6, we have bishop g5 now. This pawn is going to collapse, but instead he's going to get the a pawn now. We have rook h3, king b5, bishop takes the pawn, and now he starts to roll his a pawn down the board. Rook goes back, and now in this position after rook d1, Alekseenko Kirill decides to resign the game. So you see what happened. According to the rating, Alekseenko Kirill is a much favorite player to win the game. But you see the class of Peter Leko? What is the main reason why Peter Leko simply outplayed Alekseenko Kirill? It looked like Peter Leko was playing at 15 or 1600. He simply outplayed Alekseenko Kirill, who is a very strong grandmaster, having the rating of 2679. So the main reason here is because in Peter Leko's era, there were no engines, there were no chess computers. So chess was purely placed on strategical play. Because nowadays, engines are there, so every player is focused on calculation. But in Peter Leko's era, there were no engines. It was all purely strategical play. Just to give you a brief overview of what happened in the game, it was a simple opening. Peter Leko is like, I understand the position better. I'm going to just remove your knight from a bad bishop, and now you're just having a bad bishop from a good knight on b1. What he did was he simply traded off the light square bishop. Now black even lost his bishop pair advantage, and now he's like, okay, now if you don't sacrifice me a pawn, for example, if you just play a simple move like h6, I'm going to put my queen on e4, not allowing you to push the pawn to e4 now. Your bishop is going to remain permanently bad. I'm going to put my knight on c4, which is a good square for the knight, attacking the pawn on e5, attacking the pawn on a5, and I'm simply outplay you. That's how easy it is to play with the white pieces. I'm going to put my knight on c4, put the pawn on b3, get both my rooks, maybe on the king side, maybe attack, maybe try to capture the pawn on e5. The a5 pawn is also weak, and that's how white is planning to play. So Alekseenko is like, okay, I'll sacrifice a pawn, but Peter Leko is like, okay, now I'm a pawn up, I'm just going to improve my position, I'm going to hold on to my pawn. And this was a major issue where like both the players were in time trouble. He could have simply improved his position even further with rook ad1, but he simply traded over here. But Alekseenko Kirill got one chance, but he failed to grab it, and now Peter Leko gave no chance to Alekseenko Kirill. And now from here, Peter Leko simply outplayed Alekseenko Kirill, and he simply won in an old man style, which is amazing. So that's the game. That's how you should really play chess. That's how chess is really played, some gold chess. So I hope that this game definitely would have helped you and encouraged you to play strategical chess rather than fully focused on calculation. And that's it. I hope that you guys must have learned something from this video. If you did, make sure to like, share, and smash that subscribe button. I'm going to see you soon in the next video. Thank you for watching, and bye bye.